Hello, sweet one, and welcome to Vagina Talks. I'm called Sophia Wise One, and I am grateful for your presence here. I am in a primed place. I'm in a raw place. I'm in a, I guess the honest word that comes up is desperate, and it feels really whole. It feels really holy. It feels really whole to be so exposed. And I look forward to kind of letting that unfold with you in our time together. I've brought some medicine for us today. And by I mean she's accepted the invitation. I've invited and she's accepted the invitation to make medicine with us today. I have already felt this activation in her yes and in her invitation and in our time gathering today. So I'm going to say a few things about her and then bring her in with us. Leonore Tjia is an artist, healer, and feminist, sexuality educator, whose work lies at the intersection of soul, myth, eros, and intimacy. As a trained practitioner of internal family systems therapy, she helps people transform their emotional and sexual patterns and reawaken their innate erotic intelligence. She runs somatic workshops where people tell true sexual stories for healing and witnessing and access their inner wildness that helps us feel erotically alive. Welcome, Leonore.
Thank you so much. What a sexy intro.
Feeling it. I'm just dropping into this space. I feel so raw. And as I was, as I was reading this again and being here with you, I was thinking about I had a deeply erotic weekend. That was a lot of medicine, a lot of prayer, a lot of pleasure, a lot of deep contact in my body, and it was such a transformative and healing time because going into it I got nervous. I was talking to this lover and I was like, okay, but if somebody gets mad, we're not gonna punish each other, right? That's not it's not what we're doing anymore. That's not what I'm doing. That's what you're we kind of just the trauma memories coming up and being we can't just get a hotel room and have a romantic night. That'll just turn into a mess, right?
It's a trap.
It's a trap, right? Totally. All the pressure and all the things we haven't dealt with, we're going to have time and space and they're going to come up and they're going to be roaring and what a fucking glorious result to live my life differently. We tend ourselves and our relationship in a really different way. So that's not what happened, right? Went and had really deep, satisfying, pleasurable, lots of sex, and then went to bed early and slept through the night. It was I think we were passed out by 9:30, and it was perfect. Woke up early, and so just as I was reading, I was thinking about that soul and myth and eros and intimacy and what it is to be erotically alive, and how much after we have that exposure, how much has to fall away, right? That's that. And I feel that's part of where I am right now. I'm half in the remembering and half in the holy forgetting. Forgetting my old ways and forgiving them and forgetting them, not necessarily in concept, but forgetting them in pathway, right?
Somatically, yeah.
So get in here.
Yeah, the shedding never ends, right? It's the expansion. I was just talking to a client yesterday who was I just feel there's this erotic realm that I get a glimpse of sometimes, and then the veils come back down and become very thick, and I just don't know how to get there. And I was I think that's true for all of us. It's certainly been true for me of glimpse, visioning, contact, excitement, fear, anxiety, instant shutting it down, get that liberation away from me, and then back into life, longing, feeling trapped, going back, just that opening and closing forever. And I've had one thing I appreciated when you reached out to me was like, you really asked me to speak about my work and also my own journey as an ongoing process, not as like a one and done.
Let me laugh over here loudly.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah. So where are you now today? What's alive? Where are you expanding and experiencing new things? Like our visionary, like what are you seeing? What are you bringing through? And what are you letting go?
Yeah, let's see. It was nice preparing for this because I got my journal out and really kind of wrote a bit about timelines of things to like really look at the big phases of my life. So, just to give some context, like I'll speak, from my own positionality. Like I just turned 30. And I've been working in the sexuality field now for 8 years. So I entered this work early. It was actually my first job after college. And some of what had laid the groundwork for that for me was, having really read a lot of feminist critical theory in college and really coming from a lifelong path of feminist spirituality myself. So I've been involved in goddess worship and full moon rituals and in really exploring animist spirituality and specifically the suppressed traditions of the divine feminine cross-culturally from a very, very young age. Like read The Red Tent and The Mists of Babylon when I was like 12 and was like, I want to find a moon circle. And my mom was like, I don't know what that is, but okay.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. And
beautiful.
I had the gift of like supportive enough parents that was a life-saving, that was truly a life-saving thread for me in the tortures of adolescence and growing up still in a very heteronormative, mononormative, primarily white, extremely achievement-oriented society and feeling this intense dissonance as a biracial person, as a bisexual person, as someone who really felt early desires towards polyamory and exploring BDSM. Like that sense of being different and of not belonging has been very woven into my story. And also being someone who I think would be described as like highly sensitive and highly empathic, So anyway, that's a little bit of the context of, just like where I'm coming from myself. And in these, I'm blessed to have walked this professional path around sexuality, which has afforded so much space for my own healing and investigation, continued expansion, as you know.
Yeah.
It's really quite amazing. And quite horrible sometimes.
I have a friend who always says,
in that.
Yeah, I have a friend who says horrible, horror, so horror-able, horrible. Words are funny. It's like, it's really, it's a real thing of like, it's this like deep professional work and there's nothing that's not personal about it, right? Like, it is at the core like intimacy, like, and we always have our own lens. So it's so supportive and also activating,
so confronting.
Confronting.
Totally. Yeah. So I mean, I've had periods in my life of huge openings into like these liberations from my internalized homophobia, of like, oh my God, I really like realizing what the huge load of queer shame that I was carrying and didn't have words for that, of like, oh my God, or just realizing that the same level of shame and burden I've had around my polyamorous desires, like, oh God, these like huge awakening moments that really like threw me around. And opened new horizons of vision and possibility, and also the terror of then how to integrate that and this like cost of what I'd have to give up, the relationships, the communities, the approval of my family, and the sense of being normal. I think like that letting go of conformity, of having a normal, quote unquote, normal path and normal life. It's really come in waves and there've been really big ones A lot of those big ones for me happened probably 2012, 2013. And so I am, about 6 years in now of really, well, I've been really openly relating for about a decade, but kind of made the decision to be fully polyamorous on August 7th, 2012. I know the exact date. Um,
Oh.
so I've had, years of like actually really exploring and enacting a very non-normative erotic life in, living my queer polyamorous life, exploring my BDSM desires. I'm doing professional work that's associated with all of these things. And then also just doing the work of fulfilling, just like, how do I really be who I am and evolve with that, because it's always changing. So I guess that's kind of the context that brings me to this conversation with you now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like where I am really now is, I'd say like this last period for me has been about, to be honest, it's mostly really been about rage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What comes up for you as I say that?
Well, when I was sitting on the floor yesterday weeping, and then just at this edge of like I was upstairs. I was like, I'm like, bang, I broke everything I touched yesterday. Computer cord, I lost a drawer out of a piece of furniture that's probably 80 years old. That's like my family's furniture. Like it was a really special day of breaking things. And I'm like, and there's a bunch of things that didn't break, but like I like bruised my shoulder and I like bumped my hand, and like was really watching myself the whole day, watching this like speed and contact that I was like engaging with the world. And I kept stopping to check in with myself, like, do you just need to call it and like go home, Sophia? Like climb, it's okay. There's no, like, you can climb into bed at 2:00. Like, this is what you need to do. And I really kept getting the guidance of like, you can't fuck it up. Like, it's just one of the, like, I also checked off a ton of shit off my to-do list. Like I did a bunch of things and like was moving forward in these ways. And at the end of the day, I just was like at the end of all of it, I was so shaken and I could barely get the words out of my mouth of just like, I'm so angry,
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a somatic, such a like visceral, non-story kind of
Mm-hmm.
rage. Like it wasn't directed towards a person or a thing. There are elements. It was like, I think of it as like, I could really feel if the rage was a river, there are things that I could see floating by in the river that
Mm-hmm.
I could try to say were the cause of the river, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I kept seeing parts of my marriage or my divorce like floating by, and I kept seeing like parts of my like childhood or my fears or anxieties around being blamed or punished by by traumatized adults that are
Mm-hmm.
responsible for caretaking, right? So I could like see these things, but mostly what was happening for me and what I think is still happening for me today is just this like, it's just discharge. It's just this like
Mm-hmm.
shaky discharge. It's like
Mm-hmm.
pent up energy that is just coming out in a very, I'm trying to move slow so I can like let it move. Usually I often have a very like assertive and aggressive way of working with my rage. Not aggressive towards my rage, but allow it to be aggressive, like to let the fire rage, to like cook it. And I've been really guided through the sex that I had this weekend, followed by literally a day of roller coasters with a bunch of friends. I did like the shaking. It was just so mad. I just was shake everything, like these deep lines. I'm noticing a rotation in my leg that I've been working on for years. I woke up this morning, it happened last night and this morning, and my leg isn't rotating anymore. Like it's shifted. I can feel this pattern. I'm like, what the, like decades of like knee leg rotation. It's just like, so I'm laying here going like, okay, like let me just be so gentle because it's happening. Like I don't have to like make the release happening. So that's what, when you say, when you're like, when it's been up is like rage, and I'm like, oh, that's like so like just so tender for me right now.
Yeah, I feel that. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks.
Yeah. And like how beautiful and raw to have the experience of like deep pleasure that expands horizons, and then to feel like where that life energy goes down into the depth of like discharging these things that are so often really stagnated for us.
Yeah.
I feel that too. And also the necessity of like not needing to intellectualize or analyze it, but just like letting it come out.
Yeah. I just let myself like work from bed today. Like it was just like a friend was like, can I get a ride to this thing? And I was like, no. Like I'm eating an apple in my bed, like, and like doing work slow. Like I'm like tip tapping at some things. Like, yeah, it feels good to have, that feels like something that's hard won. And I'd be curious to hear you talk about like your experience with rage, but it feels hard won to be so gentle with myself in this feeling that's like so uncomfortable and I've been told so many, like I can feel the shame of that, to have rage at all. Like that's also what's part of clearing, you know? So to be able to be like, I'm just sad and angry, like at myself and at my life and at the circumstance and like at this larger picture, and it's not the whole picture, it's there, and I'm just gonna be soft and like trust it, you know? Like that feels like it's such answered prayers, you know? Like, I'm so grateful for it.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah. Like, one nasty moment out my mouth, like last night and this morning, like one tone, you know, like one moment of being like, oh nope, don't want to spill it out. And aside from that, it's been like real gentle. So
it's a huge victory to let the deep waters flow like that. Yeah, you know, I mean, what I can speak on is like, and holding space for people around their deep sexual stories. You know, one thing that has been so normalized for me for all these years now is just the level of sexual harm and violation that so many of us have experienced. And not only the harm that we experience in sex itself, but also the soul wounds, the soul violations that then play out in sexuality. So like when we haven't been, you know, and this is kind of where my work is more and more going these days, as I kind of move away from being like a sex coach or sex educator who talks about like anatomy and mechanics and go more into the depth work. It's like so often the challenges and the sorrows we experience in sexuality have their roots in something much deeper, you know, of how much we haven't been really welcomed into our lives, or like welcomed to be the people that we are on a deep level. We haven't been encouraged to, you know, to have the gifts that we have. And I think especially for high sensitive and highly empathic people, like just the agony of living in this like disconnected world that's sacrificed animism on the altar of modernity, that's like thrown so many of our sacred traditions into the fire, and that's just like collectively in the process of destroying itself. Like our own like our orphaning is just so vast, and our sexual and erotic orphaning is very much a part of that. And God, there's just these tremendous undercurrents of rage and grief under everything, and we are so gaslit and so shamed and made to feel so crazy for feeling that at all, and it poisons us and it makes us feel sick. Yes. Yeah. So yes, I mean, there's so many different, you know, parts of this kind of sexual empowerment work, like yes to more alternative narratives, and yes to more information, and yes to the role modeling, and yes to access and all this. But like, I think my own soul role is really in like the underworld work of like open up these deep gates, because we have so much that ungrieved that we need to grieve for, and we have so much rage that deserves to be expressed. And this path of opening up, you know, to the soul light, and really like letting Eros be a way that we express the joy of who we really are, requires that we be willing to feel more of everything, to feel more pleasure, being willing to feel more of the sorrow, to feel more joy and connection, be willing to feel more of the loneliness and the rage. So it is all part of it.
Yes. Yes. that it's like, and I had this moment when you were talking where I realized, and I can think of one, and I know she's listening, I know she knows, you're a nurse. I think about how when we witness and hold space for other people, a lot of my listeners, I'm gonna tell Leonore a little bit about you all right now. It's just that like a lot of us are those space holders, and we call those medicine spaces, and we hear those stories. And it's deep. Like, I think a big part that I am, thanks to this conversation, will turn pretty undeniably towards right now, but I think have been gathering to turn towards, is the recognition of how much, how exhausted and rage all this feeling is from just witnessing and holding space for the people and like the stories that people have been through. Yeah, it's a deep, I just kind of lose words about it. So maybe I think the way that I am right now is to pray about it. Because my instinct is to go and do it later, but it's like we could just all do it together now. So yeah, just naming there's, and you're really welcome to jump in here at any point. But it's what I'm seeing is, let me see. I'm seeing the threads of harm. I'm seeing the territories that are torn. And do you touch people's bodies, Leonore? Is that part of your work sometimes? Yeah. It's like the feeling of like our bodies and the feelings of our souls, the ways that these places have left gaps. And so the prayer in my heart is that those places, there's so many ways to heal a gap, right? Like, we can sew a patch, or it can fill, or it can be lined. It's like a million things, right? But it's like whatever it is, like those parts that are so wrecked are healed, and the parts of us that are the witnesses to that healing, because that's, I know that I have been able to do and walk in the way that I have with people is because of the power of the witnessing, like to see the healing in action, right? It's not worse after, right? It's like, it is a healing process. And yet there's this way in which, for me right now, the reverberation of hearing those stories again and again and again. And so I think I'm really praying to our ancestors right now who have heard those stories like have watched them in real time and then hear them again and again. And I just ask for their wisdom of how it is to stay in the true sight and the true healing, so that presence and love, wholeness and joy. And I guess I just also just want to name the exhaustion, like the exhaustion and the fear that come up with all of it. I feel so I don't make any sense. Bless it all. Yeah. Yeah. How are you being with it? How are you moving with the work of the anger? I also, I have such a love affair with anger. It's such the like cooking fire, you know. It's like, I know, like, yeah, I don't know. It's like that isn't not true today. It's just a different side of it, you know. So
I do know. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, what was coming for me just when you were speaking was, you know, just reflecting on like how hard one it is for me to be able to witness my own anger and rage. You know, it's been a long journey to be able to do that. And especially being like this kind of highly sensitive and highly empathic person who, you know, is so often a witness and a story gatherer, you know, like as probably a lot of people listening are, like, we're the people who, the person next to us on the airplane.
Strangers, yep.
Story, and it's like, you know, you're talking to someone you've just met and then they're just like, you know, and like you feel it coming, you know, like you feel it, and then you're like, your voice gets all low, and you're like, oh fuck, here I go again, you know, and like, hey, I know that we don't really know each other, but I just think I can tell you this right now, and you're like, fuck, and you're like, I'm here holding space for you.
Yep.
Oh God, this the desperation of being like this like involuntary witness at times. It's like so crazy making. And I think it really just is because our world is so impoverished for true listening that just the tiniest bit of it, like what is actually maybe distracted and preoccupied listening on our part, is still like potent.
Oh, fucking say it again. That shit is so
many
real.
People out there that like our version of like really poor or mediocre listening is still like quality shit. For, you know, because the bar is so incredibly low, and so it means that people just feel the chance to unload some of what they are carrying all the time. And you know so that's just like, I'm just with you and like with everyone else for whom that's true, like really being a lifelong experience. And so being someone who does have like a soul devotion to listening and to compassion and to care and to presence, you know, who's like really devoted to that beautification of the world on that level, like enrichment of presence, it can make it so hard to actually feel when I am angry. In part because my anger, you know, between that and then, you know, the whole fucking legacy of like female socialization and all of the cultural and gendered, et cetera, you know, parts of that, it's like my own anger in my life often hasn't come as it kind of normally looks, as it's supposed to look. My anger has been like, my rage has really been disguised much more as like the self-attack, the perfectionism, this extreme over-attunement to other people's needs and desires. Dismissal of my own experience, you know, because I'm so attuned to someone else's. It's like my rage has really been disguised much more as devotion, as depression, as the need to withdraw from other people for a long period of time, you know, as the feeling, the needing to be alone because being around other people feels like being watched, and to be watched is to be judged. Like all of the ways I've not been able to just have really clear, strong, pure, uninhibited contact with life. You know, it is really only very recently that I have come to understand all of that as kind of manifestations, twisted manifestations, but manifestations of rage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And anyone who wants to really study those rage disguises should absolutely read the book Healing Rage by Ruth King. That has shed so much light on this for me. So, yeah, you know, it's like rage is not the problem. It's this work is about, and I'm going to quote her here, it's about reclaiming the positive energies that have been distorted by the oppression of rage.
Yes.
And in that is our capacity to create uninhibitedly, to live from an inner authority, and to really be alive and to live in, you know, an exquisitely responsive way. Yes, Sophia. Heard you.
Yeah. I'm having my own, like, I just feel so, it's so funny. You know, yesterday morning I was writing about some visions that I wanted, and I wrote about really wanting to have these like potent episodes. And then we rescheduled ours, and now we're here, and like this is what's happening. And I'm really present with my judge right now. My judging at myself, and I keep twice now I've thought like, oh, I should read the writing that I have, and the thought that's come up in my head is like, no, you can't do that. Like, shrink, you know what I mean? You can't, you know, it's like, I think there must have been something, I don't remember exactly, but I almost remember exactly the first time somebody said, you can't quote yourself. Like in my, you know, my early teens, like somewhere in the academic world, just being like, it's the worst thing in the world. Like you could never quote your own self. Like it's the most obnoxious, it's the most whatever. And I think that moment must have terrified me so wretchedly, because I knew that that's what I would be doing. Like for the rest of my life was like, I'm going to write stuff and I'm going to say stuff. And like, I'm going to quote myself because it's not mine anyway. You know what I mean? Like, it's like coming through me. And so it's like when I'm looking back and reading it, and like, even when it is mine, like it's worth it to like lift up and like do it again. And when you're talking about the disguises and the twists of rage, and when we're talking about this like optimal life force and flow, and to me, the rage is obscuration or obstruction. When there is obscuration and obstruction, rage is a force that moves it, right? That pushes it. And so it clears, its purpose is to clear the channel. And so then so much of the question is like, what, for me right now, it's not always the question at all. So much like we talked about not needing to intellectualize it, there's like the thing is to just experience it. But for me, as I'm sitting here with you, knowing if the feeling is depression or withdrawal, or this notion of like, I'm just gonna, knowing, like if I know that I'm staying in bed and not getting dressed and like not brushing my teeth as ways of raging, right? Like if I'm conscious of that, this is the way I'm going to rage today. I'm like, not going to take care of myself, but I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to take care of myself while I don't take care of myself. Yes. Because like I'm going to rage by not doing these things, and I'm going to be soft with myself while I do that, and do it with consciousness, like be my own witness to that, like knowing that, right? So there's this other part for me that's like, okay, I know that behind that, there's an increase of creative life force that's coming through. There's like something that wants to come through. And so it's like both that this powerful weekend, this like raw ceremony. I've had a lot in the past couple weeks. I've had a lot of this like poly ceremony, like witch wound intersection stuff come up of just being like, it's been a little while, but I've had a couple of like crying in the car or like nightmares. Like I had a dream last night where I was like being chased, like being with a bunch of people and being chased, and we were all magic users. That's like a real thing. That's a common dream for me, is like a bunch of magic users and then we're on the run. It's like, oh, how redundant, right? So so I keep feeling like I know what will actually make me feel better is I will sit and rage and let that move until the thing that's coming up in me comes up and comes through me and comes into being or comes through me, right? But one of the things that I'm noticing, or one of the things that I know I used to do and that I'm noticing now, is that socialization of like not taking up too much space or doing what I want or being who I am, that core notion, that soul wounding that you're talking around about our sexuality, and another way we could say that is our creative essence, right? Like our creative soulful essence on this, our like ecstatic erotic nature, which is to dream and vision and create, that there's something that like wants to come up, and the habit or the patterns of crushing that in myself.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Was there more?
I don't. Yeah. No, I don't know. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I hear you summarizing a couple things. Like one is, I think in general, like what has you're summarizing something that touches on like a mindset shift that I think is deeply needed for a lot of us, which is to get out of this place of constantly trying to fix ourselves and getting out of this like place where we expect that our as I said, like that our problems will be done, or that like we won't enact our patterns anymore. And you know, on like a lifelong journey of sexual exploration and sexual liberation, like within the broader context of capitalist heteropatriarchy, like it is to expect that we can fix ourselves and be done with it is actually just another way that we enact our own oppression.
Right.
And so because of that, like there's this shift from like, oh, I thought I was done. I did the trainings. I did the fucking priestess sisterhood. I did orgasmic meditation. I came out as poly. I came out as queer. You know, like it's not like that. It's just not a linear track. And it's not a linear track in terms of our relationship with our own inner critics either. It's much more cyclical is what I find. We circle around, we consolidate the growth, we experience greater space, and then the ancestors hire us again for another piece of work. I just started a master's program in counseling psychology, which is just like massively triggering and like, you know, like, wow, so much regression, you know. We experience the external stresses that make these things flare again, and the real measure of the work is, you know, it's not just do we go back into the same patterns, but it's like, can we be aware of what is happening and actually be okay with ourselves even when we're not okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's actually like the wild instinct that is being repaired in me, you know, much more than like never withdrawing or never, you know, skipping a meal or kind of never all my patterns, but actually being like, oh, I'm noticing them in this thing, and I can be okay with myself even when I'm not okay.
Right. I think it's that place of, it's so much more helpful or productive in this process of like healing, is that notion of yes, the elimination is a part, but adding something in is usually actually the first step. That part of this notion of like always trying to get rid of something is also like this notion of something's wrong, so we have to get rid of it, right? And so adding in this piece of like, I'm in this pattern, instead of immediately going to, I have to change this pattern so I'm not doing it, what is it to add another piece, which is like, I'm going to love myself, or I'm going to witness myself, or I'm going to be with myself. I'm not going to be alone.
I'm going to be playful with myself. I'm going to laugh at myself.
Right.
I'm going to remind myself that there's something I clearly love and actually maybe find pleasurable in this sadomasochistic game I'm playing with myself.
Yeah.
And I'm going to like have my agency within this instead of just collapsing into the self-criticism, the self-judgment.
Right. There's so much.
Staying out of the black hole.
I missed it.
Staying out of the black hole.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this like miraculous thing that happens for me, which is that like it's like the lights stay on, or the door stays open, or like there's like a breeze that can come in and out. So it's like the same thing's happening, but it doesn't happen the same way because the lights are on, or because there's a breeze that passes through the room. So it's like, even though I'm still like stomping or banging into things, it's like the breeze passes by my face and I can feel it. And so I take a breath for a moment, which means immediately I'm actually doing a different thing, right? And the way that the other piece about that is that there's just so much more energy to actually really enact a different behavior in that. You know,
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I think that's why pleasure is such an important part of this too, because our instincts around pleasure have been really destroyed and really harmed. So a lot of us who have to do a lot of work is to train ourselves that actually pleasure is good medicine and we need it and we deserve it, that it helps us, that it's not dangerous. Study the ways that we put a cap on the upper limit of our pleasure too.
Yes.
See that we're actually we're capable of so much more pleasure than we afford ourselves. And that we can choose to allow ourselves to have more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do. In fact, I just said, for those of you who don't know, Gay Hendricks, The Upper Limit. Is that what the name of the book is? Do you know?
I think so,
I think so too. But Gay Hendricks, Upper Limit, I literally at the end of last night was like, I think I'm upper limiting. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, and I knew it. Like, I had such an incredible time. And I was just like, oh, this is going to be, I just knew it was going to have a doozy of like integration, I didn't know it was going to be like what it was. And all that being said, I had like the gentlest upper limiting mess of a day, like ever. Like, it's like, I can totally see that like for myself of just being like, let me like not skip the opportunity to publicly say thank you, ancestors, and thank you, self, for the gentleness to like rage or to act out or to bump around or to break stuff or lose stuff, but to be also so kind, like I used to just upper limit by just being horrendous to myself, like cruel, like really going after myself in really aggressively, emotionally abusive ways. And I didn't do that yesterday. So that I get that too. Like I get to have that. And then there's this opportunity. Like the other thing that was so wild for me when I ran a bath and I got in and just laid there and like stared in the dark. Like I didn't light a candle. I didn't put on music. Like I was just like, I just got to get in the bath. And I like got in the bath and I just laid there. And then I watched my mind kind of wander. And then I started to have this idea of a class to teach, which is in one way totally not new at all, because I always have like a million ideas. But in another way, something that you don't know about this, Leonore, is that I basically kind of stopped working in a lot of ways like almost a year ago now. Like I just hit like a burnt out wall and was like, if I can't really shift the pattern inside it, I need to like really do something different, and have like really taken like a radical walk in terms of like not working or selling my services in the way that I used to at all, while I'm really kind of re-understanding myself. And I felt this energy coming up in me, and I was like, oh, this isn't just like a million ideas that I have all the time. Like this could really be this feels different. Like this feels like really coming from a different place. And it was like very exciting and inspiring. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to like let that kind of percolate and come through and be like, yeah, that's like a normal thing that happens too, right? To have this like like that clearing, like all that congestion clears out. And then like this energy starts to come in. And like, yeah, for a long time, I've been thinking about like working, just saying, it's like, are you a highly sensitive person that grew up with a chronically ill caregiver? Like, why don't I say the fucking thing? And it's like, I know why I haven't said it, because I didn't want to say a thing that would hurt or offend my chronically ill caregiver, you know? And it's just like, oh my God, if this is the clearing that makes that kind of articulation or ability to like step up and move forward, like in that way, at those knockings, you know, it's pretty amazing.
And I feel like you're describing like what this process really is in its core. It's like open to pleasure, open to the greater horizons of pleasure, have a corrective experience that also like awakens the grief for what we haven't been able to experience and express before, like touch that upper limit, you know, and then like we could call it contraction, you could call it integration, but it's just like the way I understand it is like the energy goes where it needs to go. It then goes into the places where we don't fully trust ourselves. It goes into like into the places where we're still holding smallness, and it just puts us in the tumble dryer there, you know, until these things that are stagnated move. And it also clears the space for like the real inspiration to come. That's not forcing, that's not compulsive doing, that's not trying to prove ourselves, but like that really comes from the inner directives.
Well said.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a kind of like nerdy technical question?
Sure.
Just to share a little bit about when we're talking about animus, like what are we talking about for people who aren't familiar with that vocabulary? Like when you're talking about reclaiming our animus or our animus nature in our sexuality and our erotic stuff. Can you talk a little bit about just kind of like what are we reclaiming and because I think part of the oppression is the loss of language around it, which we have. This is like an understatement of the century, right? It's like, but the fact that we have any words at all, but then we don't even know those words, right? It's like we have a vulva and a clitoris and a vagina, but you know, it's radical just to like learn those 3 words. So even though there's like so many more words to learn about our genitals or our root energy, so kind of talking about sexuality or claiming our like our wildness. Can you like give us some more words around that and what they mean?
Yeah, I'll just kind of go for it in a nonlinear way. So animism and animist spirituality like refers to the belief that everything has a spirit. So, you know, here in the West, we grow up with this materialist paradigm that says basically, you know, like we have like Judeo-Christian religions as a norm, and we have this sort of materialist, secular, like scientific outlook on life, right? That says basically like the earth is not alive. And like, you know, there we have like natural resources that we use, and this is like the underlying paradigm with which we're like currently destroying the planet. And it's just like, it wasn't always like this, you know, like even, you know, those of us with European ancestry, I'm biracial, and, you know, half of my family traces their ancestral roots to Europe. Like, you know, Europe had a wide variety of indigenous animist spiritual practices up into the Middle Ages. And it was all very uprooted alongside the enclosure of the common lands, the beginning of capitalism, and the witch burnings. That all went together. So you can think of animism in a way as like having empathy with the natural world. You know, when the trees, I think it was Starhawk who said that, So I'll, call her name in about that. Like when the trees and the rivers and the mountains are alive and are beings with names and spirits, you have an intimate relationship with them the same way you have an intimate relationship with your lover. And when the trees and the rivers and mountains are your friends and lovers, like you don't destroy them and cut them down, you're in relationship with them. So for me, this is the deeper paradigm that I hold in my work with people around sexuality. And certainly a lot of people that I work with as clients do not hold my own spiritual beliefs, nor do they need to. But because so much of the work that I do is really about the inner world, it is about, understanding and changing our relationships with these parts of ourselves, the inner child, the inner critic, It is about calling back empathy for ourselves in this deep way. And it is about seeing sexuality itself as a force that comes from nature, like as the lived experience of feeling deeply alive and belonging to life. And I'll offer two definitions of eros that have been very meaningful for me. One comes from Rollo May, who is an existential psychologist, and he said that eros is the desire for reunion with that which we truly belong to. Yes. And yes, eros is the desire for reunion with that which we truly belong to. And L.J. Tessier, who wrote an amazing book called Dancing After the Whirlwind, said that eros is the longing for and the experience of interconnectedness. The longing for and the experience of interconnectedness. So as I said, like my work increasingly moves away from like sex education and sex coaching, because from that definition, there's actually quite a lot of sex and sexual activity that we have and do that really is not erotic. It actually is not about interconnectedness or belonging or reunion at all. It's really much more about performance, conquest, domination, and compliance.
I want to just take a moment and bless all of us who have unconsciously and non-consensually participated in sex that way. Mm-hmm. And that when we hear those words, we go like, it's like, sure, there's the part where we may think about other people, but I think most of us actually have a moment of like, oh, I'm so familiar with that. Like, like being someone else's conquest or being on a conquest on another person or compliance. Like, I mean, every word you dropped, just taking a moment to just recognize like all of us here in this moment. Oh, you know what? I'm going to say it. If you're listening and you have come through a line, it's such an incredible thing right now. I have been meeting people, they're young humans that are having a foundationally different experience. And I just want to, like, starting now, I want to make even more space in these dialogues of like, we're in a bridge time, which means right now, some of us are deeply familiar with that. And a lot of us have a lot of familiarity, and other people, little young people that are being raised from the earliest age with the permission that they get to decide if they hug someone or not. And that they get to communicate that, and that their body's pleasure is safe and sacred for them to know and have. I've met little people who are growing up in that space that they get to say like, oh, that's different. That's not like eros and sex. That's role playing. That's like power dynamics. Those are exercises. Yeah. So I just want to like bless those of us that are in the process of rewiring our associations or definitions of what sex is. In that way.
Yeah, very much. Very much. We do live in a time of like tremendous perspective shifts. I mean, foundational paradigm shifts. And we are also really in an age of planetary crisis, which I feel very acutely, and in my more angsty moments, like I'm like, oh my God, how is this work around sexuality like contributing to the earth herself, the earth itself, in such a time of crisis. But it seems to really be, you know, about, like, on a deep level, we're being called to examine, like, are we enacting this dominator culture? Are we just going to continue to enact this dominator culture, or are we willing to really make a deep shift into a paradigm of interconnectedness? And that, of course, is going to play out in our sexuality, you know, in the intimate terrain of our sexuality, because that's where all of this is so heightened and amplified, and where we have such a huge storehouse of unprocessed rage and grief and trauma about this. So, you know, I know I'm just throwing, you asked for words, and I hope this is
no, it's perfect. This
is a lot of words
everything
out there. You know?
Please,
it's like,
please.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just stop there. But that's some of what this, you know, all this work around rewilding means to me.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's awesome. We're gonna, hold on a second. Okay. Hold on, we're having okay. No, all right, that's okay. Da-da-da-da-da. So I'm gonna do it. Yep. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Good job, non sequitur land. So whoa, okay. Everything is just trying to do a thing here. Okay. All right. Caitlin, can you clean up this whole section here where it gets a little crazy? Can you just cut it out? We'll come back around with it. Caitlin's my editor. This is Leonore. Caitlin.
Hi.
Okay. So you like said this whole thing, and then I'm going to say in response something clear-headed. Yes, that's exactly what I was looking for. Some more context of like, what are we talking about? What's some of the language that can help articulate what we know to be true? And say, like, when I say like what we know to be true, I'm talking about those of us who have like an innate understanding of animism, right? Like nobody had to tell me like that everything was alive. Mm-hmm. I don't think. Now I definitely came
right. You
from,
just knew.
I just knew, you know,
yeah.
And every time anyone's ever told me, it's been like a yeah, like of course, you know, and one of the things that you kind of were talking about at the end is like, not only is this the question of like, are we perpetuating the dominance here in our sex exchange, this literal primary source where, you know, life is being procreated and these like we're passing on imprints, right? Like in those spaces, like how many of us were procreated in spaces that had some eros, luckily, and had a lot of dominance and what's the word you used that I used again? Compliance. Yeah, and these like these power dynamics and these notions of, you know, it's like I mean a lot of us, you know, my parents really loved each other, and you know, from, you know, I mean that's the other thing I try not to do without people's consent in general is like I try not to like look into people's eyes and read their souls or get reports from the Akashic records without someone asking, nor do I try to like infer everything that I can know about someone's life within like 3 sentences, let alone their sex life, right? There's a certain degree where it's like I get to use that information for my well-being. I get to like be
right.
honoring of that, you know, but so it's like just knowing that like we've come from those spaces and that we're in a process of evolving that in ourselves. And one of the things that I think is exciting is that our ability to have a consciousness, I think, has been really deepened by the wounding of these past few centuries. Like there's a way in which we've been carved deeply, which is neither here nor there in terms of like good or bad or moral or right or wrong. It's like right now in this moment, it's just like where we've come from, and I can see to make an opportunity out of that, like an alchemy of that, like lots, like lots of compost. Just like lots and lots and lots, you know, there's a richness in that. And in that same way, you talk about inside our sex, like that's where that's taking place. And one of the things that came up for you when you were talking was that inside that space is also this untapped storehouse of energetic potential. That when we come into these spaces and even engage in power dynamics in consensual, conscious ways, where we're exploring and saying, what are these pathways doing? Or we're connecting to our animist nature in a intentional way and saying, like, I'm not just having sex by myself right now. Like, I'm laying on the ground and I can feel and sense the air that's touching my skin, and everything is my lover. Like, knowing how I can be changed by a lover's touch, or seeing the way that I can change someone. Of course, what is it to fully embrace the truth of, like, what is it to become the air's lover? And like the way that I can contribute to a lover's healing by my caring and by my touch and by my breath and by my presence. And so what happens when we become the lovers of the seas? And the, you know, and in that real relationship, what kind of potential or potency we gather in our own selves when we claim that remembering.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. Yes, beautifully said. Yeah. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's about getting back to the poetic and mysterious and mystical, like, engagement with life that many of us perhaps felt as children before it was shamed out of us. But that animist wonder of, like, the earth being alive and having so many experiences and adventures to offer, there's an awe to that we so miss out on as adults whose lives have been really conditioned into just mostly working and doing and performing.
Performing. That was that word, the key word that I...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I think we're speaking about this, like, really deep shift in sex, not just being something that we do that's like everything else on our to-do list, but that can open the door to a different way of being, in which these deeper connections are really felt, and that helps us to be more alive, and then to be also more in touch with our own souls, and to work more from that soul place in our lives.
It's good. It's good. This is good stuff. Good times. Good things. I'm gonna quote my psychic Mindy Lou here. He likes to say, there is no law of bad, only the law of good. And the law of good is the law of God. When you want to feel good, you want to feel God. That's that is like a definition of Eros right there, right? It's like all things are made of life force, and to want to come into remembering and to want to be in relationship with life force. There's a real element here that I want to talk about around it's trust, and trusting the process, and trusting one's self.
And I'm getting it too. Yeah. I was like going there and you started talking about this. I mean, please finish if I have a thread I want to pick up, and I'm wondering if it's the same thread.
Well, I kind of just want you to maybe, I don't know, maybe you just go with it, because that is I forgot about that. But when I looked at it, I was thinking about I think of this card in my mind that I pulled a couple days ago, is I always think of as a rage card. But the truth is, it's not a rage card, it's a trust card. It's about trusting the process and moving through it. So, so I just like glanced at it and was like, oh shit, this is really about trust. Like, oh gosh. So I want to know what's coming up for you. And
yeah. So what just came up for me was like, you used the word trust, and what came up for me was like this thing about understanding like the balance or the interplay of agency and surrender. So of like, yeah, wow, you know, we're talking about like these really big things. It's like a deep, and for me, it's like, I always like to approach things on the level of the soul. You know, it's just more satisfying than being on the level of the mind, although I do love to intellectualize, or the emotions, like the level of the heart, all wonderful. But to me, it's really like, I do think I do my best work on the level of the soul, because the soul like has the breadth and depth to like hold and witness all of like the horror that's been inflicted, but also all of the beauty, you know?
Yes.
And to weigh that all in like the deep balance that can still hold this is like, I'm still grateful to be here, and I'm still grateful to be alive. And I really need to like work from that place in order to be in this work. Cause as you were naming, just like the exhaustion and the burnout is very real. And the re-traumatization, the vicarious trauma is also very real. So in my own journey as a practitioner of this work, I've gotten really clear that I need to like really be coming at this from the level of the soul, and doing my best work with people who can go to that soul place. So with that, you know, we're talking about like this massive shift in how we like experience eros and how we like experience life itself. And what came to me was to explore this interplay of agency and surrender, because there's a lot to it's just, I think like I really want to say that we need both. You know, agency for me is like the ability that we have to just pursue what we want to pursue, to create ourselves as like really independent beings with free will, you know, to the agency to look at the ways that our sexual pasts have been conditioned by these like non-consensual experiences. I mean, both like experiences we were perhaps forced into, but also just the narratives that we unconsciously take on about who we're supposed to be as sexual people, all of that, and that part of our agency is like really looking at that critically and deciding like, I can choose to do this differently. You know, I refuse to carry that, and I refuse to continue to enact this. And I have the right to do things my own way. And even if no one else in my family has ever talked to me about this, even if none of my friends support me in this, even if I've never had a lover who encouraged me in being this way, like, I am living my life and I get to choose how I'm going to do this. So there's this like the agency of claiming our own path, you know, and there's so much involved in that, the deep boundary work that is always required. Just the constant like raising of our consciousness about that, you know, and in some ways that's very kind of pragmatic and political work too. And you know, a lot of it is also about skills. Like there's a lot of, I think you and I have kind of kept this conversation in like the philosophical and the spiritual and emotional realms, but there's a lot of concrete skills that are required to be on this path. How much can I actually notice and take responsibility for my needs? How much can I then communicate that? How much can I regulate myself when someone else isn't able to meet me in my desires and needs? How do I operate from this place of inner authority, you know? And how do I develop discernment to actually tell what supports me and what does not support me?
Boom!
Ongoing life skills, you know, it's like we make ourselves into a really, there's that Buddhist metaphor of like making ourselves into the good cup, like a really solid good cup, you know, which is like, I mean, the psychodynamic people would say, like ego strength,
Right.
like the real ego strength to be on this path. And then there's also the side of surrender, the being able to open ourselves to the ecstatic realms, to deeply let go, to have this trust in life, to to open ourselves to the transcendent sides of it too. And I see that often it's like we're kind of overdeveloped in one side and underdeveloped in the other. Like I think for a lot of highly sensitive and empathic people, we do have this innate ability like to let go, to empathize and go into someone else's experience, to go into an ecstatic experience. But we really need to do a lot of boundary work and communication work and work in our needs, Or there are others who are very firm and maybe rigid and calcified in that, and they need to learn how to actually let go and have more trust and how to surrender. So they're two things that go hand in hand. And that's, I think, what enables us to be on this path and have a trust in ourselves and have a trust in the mystery too.
I love everything you just said.
Did I answer? What did I answer your question?
We're like in the zone. We're just so in the zone. We're so in the zone. We're in the zone. When you were just talking right now, I was like, you just almost like half described the course that came to me in the bathtub last night. Mm-hmm. The intersection between this agency and skill development for me is that skill development on both sides, right? So the skill development around the agency and then skill development around the surrender. Right?
Surrender's a skill. It's a skill.
It's totally a skill, So that's exciting to just like hear you talk about things. I'm just like, oh, that's a cool thing. I'm just being like, it's like, yeah, one class is womb blessings. The other one is like nonviolent communication, like identify your needs and like ask, are you making direct requests? Like forget about making direct requests. Can you notice whether or not you are, right? Like step one, were you hoping all day that somebody was going to meet this need without saying anything out loud?
Right.
Because a lot of us don't even realize in the process and in the development of those skills that we're not doing them.
Totally.
It's like, because we're using the skills that we had to get our needs met. It's like, well, I wanted space, so I did all the things I've always done to get space. Mm-hmm. In this deep conscious level, if you ask them, do you want space? The answer would be like, no, I don't need space. I'm fine. I'll just slowly shut down and get judgmental of everybody around me until everybody leaves me alone.
You and pull away and viciously attack you in my own mind.
Right. Why would you possibly think I would need space right now?
Silently communicate contempt for you. Never done that.
Right? Can't possibly
Sorry,
relate.
my partners who are listening to this.
Right. Thank you to my ex-partners
who are listening to this. I love you.
Love you so much. You're so good to me. Totally. Exactly. Right. Thank you for looking at me. It's like my partner last night was like, was like just kind of, as I was stomping around, they're like, just like, just like, and I was like, I know, okay, I know, and they're like, I was just like, are you gonna eat up here? And they're like, no, I'm gonna go downstairs and watch TV. I was like, okay, fine. They're like,
Yep.
Yeah. So I want to read this thing that I wrote that I haven't read in a minute. It goes along with, I made a deck of cards, and this card is, I'll include a picture in the show notes or a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. I'm going to show Leonore right now this card. You can take a look at it and the
beautiful.
You can see it. So, and it's the Trust Truly card. So let's find out what I had to say. What had to say through me. Go. We are most easily comfortable with that which is familiar and predictable. We are told that trustworthy things will not inspire hurt in us or be unpleasant to experience. This kind of thinking divides our life into things that are trustworthy and untrustworthy. This mindset justifies limiting and restrictive life circumstances. How do I know if something can be trusted? frequent and reasonable question. The thing is, it's not about trusting something outside of yourself. This process cultivates believing in your own ability to navigate the unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
An element at play here is learning to trust that people will be who they are, and that things are what they are. A frequent problem we run into is that we trust people and things to be as we want them to be, or think they should be. When they are what they are, instead of what we expect them to be, then our quote-unquote trust is broken. Upon deeper reflection, often the disappointment and distrust stems from us not knowing better than to have expected anything different. That in turn stems from ignoring what we knew about that person or thing. This is a call to trust what you know and base your expectations and boundaries on reality as opposed to your wants and shoulding of people and circumstances. So there's a second teaching of this card. This is really reminding me of this notion of the awareness piece that we were just talking about, of just being like, how much are you like trusting really requires a presence of mind and an acceptance of like the landscape that we're in. The second teaching of this card is about trusting the ugly, painful, messy, loud, and insightful parts of the healing process. When we fully trust the wails of our grief, the screams of our rage, the hiding and festering under our shame, the awkward and ungraceful movement of our joy and ecstasy, and any other parts we are tempted to deem not spiritual or negative, we allow the space needed to let those parts be processed fully. When something is fully processed, we move forward from an experience in our lives with insight, appreciation, internalized and integrated wisdom. We also stop avoiding memories of past circumstances that might resemble what's happening, but are not actually our reality anymore. This means that we may make different decisions so as to not recreate the same experiences we've already had, without the need to avoid the elements that may appear similar. Or in the case of a desiring to recreate a pleasurable situation, we can make decisions that will contribute to having a pleasurable experience in the present without getting stuck or pulled into the illusion of a past thing needing to be mimicked exactly, which doesn't usually work. When we have access to the deeper patterns and subtler signals that led to such experiences, we can use that awareness to make informed life decisions. With practice, this will mean that we are making choices about our lives and well-being before the critical moment of observable outcomes are taking place. It keeps going. Are you still with me? Okay. We cease to hang on to an old story as the defining truth of who we are, though we may acknowledge the way that it has changed us. While trusting such intense and culturally unacceptable expressions, such as weeping, screaming, erotic and sexual expression, shutting down, zoning out, or numbing, the trick is to interpret and let go of the stories attached to why you are experiencing this particular thing. Meaning, stop judging why you're feeling a certain way as right or wrong. Instead, shift into accepting and allowing those feelings space to move fully without hindrance. Release attachment to the feeling, being justified or not, and make space for the feeling to be just that, a temporary expression of emotions and sensations. Feelings don't tell you the truth about a situation. They tell you how you feel about what you are perceiving, projecting, and imagining about a situation. Bring your focus to the body's experience and truly feel your feelings. Cultivate a practice of being in your body. This means physically feeling your body in time and space. Breathe into both the diaphragm of your lungs and your pelvic floor diaphragm. Soften the roof of your mouth by relaxing the jaw and allowing the soft palate to raise and go round, making a dome. Give yourself permission to be different, recover, and change. This level of trust in your body's wisdom and your whole being's ability to fully heal can be applied to both the present moment, allowing an experience to be fully processed in the here and now, as well as in recovering from past experiences. This kind of deep processing allows for vibrancy and full expression of self. In this way, we let those past moments to be parts of our story. The result of fully processed emotions and trauma is health and integrated well-being. Go ahead and trust truly.
Thank you. I feel like we came full circle into like right back into that. Yeah, just trust of letting the uninhibited emotions flow.
And I feel so connected in this to like, I feel like one of the things that I want to like invite you, darling listener, I feel like I got to come up with a nickname for you, my sweet listeners. Like I use Shmumpkin a lot. How do you feel about Shmumpkin? But what do you want me to call you? Is this place of like doing the study of knowing what is pleasure. I think is such a big part. Like a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, like trusting the process and doing the deep work and doing the soul groundwork is so important. It's so important. And I feel like for so many of us right now, especially those of us that have been so sensitive and doing this work for a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades, are really, I think, at a collective turning point of going like, okay, but what feels good? Like you talked about that so beautifully of like how most of us don't know. And so that's like one of the things that I kind of just want to like say and like call in and invite and send forth as like that invitation to like to know, to begin to know and to be able to discern like what actually feels good to who you are, and to bless the part that feels confusing or like confused about that. Like it's okay to not know. Like I didn't know, and I've spent a lot of time researching it and studying it by myself and with other people and like in supported spaces and taking courses and journaling by myself and in the bathtub, all those things. So I don't know. So I have 2 formal closing questions, Leonore, but before we do that, I just want to kind of hand it back to you and just be like, we kind of went a lot of places, took a big journey. Like, mic is yours. Anything.
Oh, I'm just grateful for the chance to swim in the deep waters, you know? Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And just with all that you shared, I think it just brought for me the spark of remembering like this, that the work of really getting back in touch with our intuition is about like just remembering how much that voice has always been there and always will be there and always continues to be there. And it's not that it's ever been lost. It's just like that we've been too attuned to the other frequencies, you know? And just like knowing how to find that again, like helps with all of this, and it's an unlearning process more than a learning, like an unlearning of what gets in the way of pleasure, you know, because our capacity to have pleasure is very intact.
Yeah.
As is our intuition, as is our soul.
Yes.
All of that. Yeah, just to end with the remembering of that wholeness.
I love that. I love that. You reminded me. Thank you. I feel like you just like totally just reawakened this for me, which I'm just going to like take with me for this next week. I just know I can feel it. It's like, oh, that's it. Like putting it in my pocket, which is like what feels good isn't confusing. Like,
yeah, it's actually very simple.
It's actually very simple. And one of the things that I've noticed in this past year of really choosing to pursue things that feel good is to notice how it's not confusing to my body. That like literally my knees open and my chest opens and I lean forward and it's like I get all these cues of like, ooh, yeah, that, I like it, I want it, you know? So I just really appreciate what you just said of just being like, right, like, which isn't to say that we can't have shame or confusion around our pleasures, right? And that's what you're talking about. And that's that getting the support to like untangle the stuff around it. But that moment of that thing makes me feel good is it's there. It's like,
it's there, and it's just
there.
about learning to pay attention to it again. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Leonore, this was such a treasure. Okay, I don't want to jump ahead. We'll do this was great. Okay, closing questions. The first one is, where do you like people, like what do you want people to know? Where do you like to be found? People have questions or want to connect, or do you have something coming up you want to invite people to? Anything like that. This is your time to just tell people how to find you.
Yeah, thank you. So my website is rewildingtheheart.com. I have a monthly online group that meets on the fourth Friday of the month where we just have a little online circle, and I tell a mythological story or a folk tale, and I offer a selection of poems or songs, and we just have this discussion of linking these kind of mythological themes to sexuality and to creativity. And
I love that.
Very inexpensive, so if you'd like to join, it would be lovely to have you. It's called Hearthfire Circle, so you can find it on my website. And I have some upcoming trainings coming around that I'm going to be doing really on this intersection of high empathy, high sensitivity, and how that plays out in sexuality in particular. So you can just get on the mailing list on my website to get notified about that.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you. So the closing question is, so we're birthing this new paradigm, right? We're creating, we're summoning. It's like, it's very real. It's what we're up to, right? So my question is, assuming you're with me on that, is what does it look like? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? Where are we going? What's a moment or a signal or a example? What is that landscape? What's a part of that landscape that you know? Help us remember, help us call in by sharing with us what that healed and whole landscape is.
Yeah, thank you. I'll close with the very simple questions. My sense is like it's a paradigm that's both being born but also being like deconstructed and remembered at the same time, and that we all have our part to contribute in it, in bringing forth new ideas to respond to the problems and crises of our time, in naming the invisible, making the invisible visible, naming that, deconstructing it, and then also reaching back into the past, into the ancestral realms, into the modes of being that have been suppressed within dominator culture, and remembering the seeds of relating that are still carried there. So it's like I see it as a process that's happening in many different ways and in many different forms. And I mean, my vision is like that we continue to evolve, in response to the pressures that are on us. Like, environmental crisis has always prompted evolutionary miracles in a way, and in facing these bigger planetary crises, as well as just the enormous culture of sexual mistrust that we live in, I really turn towards that etymological definition of apocalypse is like that which unveils. So there's a massive unveiling going on, and with that comes the chance to evolve in all kinds of miraculous ways, to expand the possibilities, like the creative possibilities of gender and sexuality, into ever evolving ways. And with that, to still carry forward that like soul, song dream that we are the emanation of the earth. We are Earth's art project, or Earth is Earth's art project, and we're one very, very fascinating installation of it. And just to always feel that ecological creativity as part of our erotic belonging.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. with that, just kind of riding that wave, summoning and blessing the miracles. Ah, Leonore, thank you so much for being with us today, joining us for your deep swim and your obvious, like, really deep knowledge. And ooh, yeah, pleasure sign happening right now. I just started, my mouth just got really wet. I started drooling. It's good. It's like really in here, just like really, I feel very different than I did at the start of our time together. I'm really grateful for the medicine that we shared in this time, and with you, sweet listener. And may all of us in this great unveiling time, may we be awake to the miracles as they come in multitudes. May we be awake, may we be with them, may we feel them, may we know them, may we share them, may we be them. May we have that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. As always, just reach out, my loves. Be in touch.